This is a true story, but the names of the characters have been changed. Have you ever believed that true love can overcome any obstacle? Today's story might make you reconsider. When a seemingly perfect marriage is shattered by an unexpected love between two women. Join us as we dive into this emotional journey filled with tears, heartbreak, and decisions that cannot be undone. Can a same-sex love truly be worth sacrificing everything you've built? Watch till the end and decide for yourself. Tom and I got married in the summer of 2012, fresh out of college, filled with dreams and hopes of building a life together. We had a simple yet beautiful ceremony at a beach in Montauk, New York. It was one of those golden days where the ocean breeze mixed with laughter from our friends and family. Back then, we believed love would be enough to get us through anything. We decided to settle down in a cozy little house in the suburbs of Westchester County, about an hour north of New York City. It was a bold choice for two young newlyweds, but we wanted a place to call our own, away from the chaos of the city. Tom landed a great job as a software engineer at a fast-growing tech firm in Manhattan. In those early days, everything felt perfect. We'd wake up early together, sip coffee on our porch, and talk about the future. Tom would excitedly share his ideas about the new app he was working on, while I was just starting to freelance as a writer for a small local magazine. I wrote stories about the little things, the family-owned grocery store on the corner, the bakery that had been around for decades, and the neighbors we were just beginning to know. We had our traditions, like taking long walks along the Hudson River in the evenings, watching the sailboats drift by under the golden sunset. Saturday nights were reserved for movie marathons. Tom was a big fan of Casablanca, while I couldn't get enough of Roman Holiday. Those were the moments I thought would last forever, moments that made me believe we were building something special. But as time went on, life started to change. Tom's company took off, and he became more involved, working longer hours. His business trips became more frequent, San Francisco, Boston, sometimes even Seattle. The first few trips didn't bother me much. I kept myself busy writing and taking care of our home. But over time, the space between us felt like it was growing wider, until it wasn't just the physical distance but an emotional one, too. I found myself sitting alone in our big, empty house, wondering if this was the life I'd signed up for. Our circle of friends began to shift, too. The carefree parties turned into quiet dinners with conversations about raising kids and dealing with daycare. We had always talked about starting a family, but that plan kept getting pushed back because of Tom's job. I started to realize I was missing out on things I'd once dreamed of, and the more I thought about it, the less I recognized the woman I had become. Then one spring afternoon in 2017, while wandering through the neighborhood, I spotted a flyer pinned to a community board. It advertised a flower arranging class at the local arts center. It felt like a small, spontaneous decision at the time, but something about it called to me. Maybe I was searching for a way to reconnect with myself, to fill the emptiness I was feeling. The classes were held on Saturday afternoons in a sunlit room filled with wooden tables, covered in roses, tulips, and hydrangeas. I felt a quiet joy each time I placed a stem into a bouquet, a kind of happiness I hadn't felt in years. The other students in the class were a mix of middle-aged moms escaping their hectic family lives and young college students brimming with energy. Chatting with them during those sessions made me feel like I was part of something again, like I was slowly waking up from a long slumber. But the most unexpected part of that class was meeting Rachel, a woman who seemed to be a breath of fresh air, unlike anyone I'd ever known. The flower arranging class quickly became the highlight of my week. Every Saturday, I'd walk into the sun-drenched room at the Arts Center, greeted by the sweet scent of freshly cut flowers. There were always new types of blooms laid out on the tables, delicate peonies, bright sunflowers, and soft sprays of baby's breath. It was a little escape, a slice of peace that I had come to crave amidst the monotony of my everyday life. It was during these classes that I first noticed Rachel. Rachel was hard to miss. She had this air of effortless confidence, wavy auburn hair, sharp green eyes, and a quick smile that seemed to light up the whole room. Unlike the rest of us, who were fumbling with our flower arrangements, Rachel moved with a natural grace, weaving together her bouquets like it was second nature. We were paired up one afternoon, asked to collaborate on an arrangement for the community showcase, and that's when we really started talking. "I've never seen anyone handle flowers the way you do," I remarked, genuinely impressed by her skill. Rachel laughed, a sound that felt like music against the backdrop of our quiet little class. "I grew up on a farm in Oregon," she said. "We had fields of wildflowers everywhere. My mom used to make me and my sisters help with the arrangements for local weddings. Guess I picked up a thing or two." From that moment on, Rachel and I became inseparable during the class. While others chatted about their kids or swapped recipes, Rachel and I found ourselves lost in conversations that felt deeper, more personal. She had a way of asking questions that made me want to open up, like she was genuinely interested in who I was beneath the surface. One week, we were working on a spring bouquet together, carefully arranging lilacs and daisies, when Rachel asked me out of the blue, "If you could be anywhere right now, where would you be?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't thought about what I wanted in a long time. I paused, then smiled a little, feeling a pang of nostalgia. "I'd be on the Amalfi Coast," I said. "I went there once in college, and I've always dreamed of going back." There was this tiny cafe overlooking the sea. I remember sitting there with a lemon gelato, thinking life couldn't get any better. Rachel's eyes lit up. "I'd been there too," she exclaimed. "It's one of my favorite places. There's this little cove near Positano that's almost hidden. I used to sneak away there with a book and just listen to the waves." It felt like a spark, an instant, almost magical connection. It was like we had found a secret, shared part of ourselves that neither of us had shown anyone else in a long time. After that, we started meeting up outside of class, grabbing coffee together at the little cafe down the street, or walking through the park, talking for hours. Rachel's life was wildly different from mine. She was a freelance photographer, constantly on the move, capturing moments of life through her lens. She showed me pictures from her recent trips, a sun-drenched street in Barcelona, the misty mountains of the Pacific Northwest, a candid shot of a couple dancing in the rain in Paris. Every photo had a story, and Rachel told them with a passion that made me see the world through her eyes. I found myself drawn to her energy, her zest for life. She made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. It was like she looked right past the facade I'd put up for everyone else, the perfect wife, the stable partner, and saw the person I used to be, the person I'd almost forgotten. One Saturday after class, we decided to stay back and work on an arrangement together. The art center was quiet, the sun starting to dip below the horizon, casting a warm, golden light through the tall windows. We were surrounded by a sea of flowers, their colors blending together in a soft blur. Rachel turned to me suddenly, her face serious for the first time. "You seem different when you're here," she said quietly. "Happier. Lighter." I felt a lump rise in my throat, a wave of emotions I wasn't ready to face. "Maybe it's because I can be myself here," I admitted, almost in a whisper. "No expectations. No roles to play." Rachel's gaze softened, and she reached out, taking my hand in hers. "Then maybe we should find more places where you can be yourself," she said gently. In that moment, something shifted between us. It wasn't just a friendship anymore. It was something deeper, something I couldn't quite name yet. But I knew that whatever it was, it felt real, and it felt right. One summer evening, Rachel and I decided to stop by a small cafe, tucked away in a quiet corner of the neighborhood. It wasn't a particularly special place, just a few wooden tables by the window and warm, golden lights hanging from the ceiling. But to me, it felt perfect. We sat close, with our steaming cups of coffee between us, and I noticed how the air between us had become strangely intimate. Rachel looked at me, her green eyes deep and piercing, as if she could see through every wall I had built to hide my loneliness. Her gaze seemed to touch the deepest part of my soul, the part where I had buried all my unspoken desires and unfulfilled longings. In that moment, I realized there were feelings I couldn't suppress any longer. "Do you ever feel like you're living a life that doesn't belong to you?" Rachel asked, her voice soft but tinged with a sense of longing. I took a deep breath, feeling my heart race. Yes, I admitted, allowing myself to acknowledge the truth for the first time. Sometimes I wonder if I've lost myself somewhere along the way, trying to be the wife Tom needs me to be. Rachel didn't say anything. Instead, she gently took my hand, her touch warm and reassuring. We sat there in silence, not needing words to fill the space between us. I felt a connection with her that I had never felt with anyone else, not even Tom. With Rachel, I didn't have to pretend or play a role. I could just be myself. After that night, evenings like this became more frequent. We began spending more time together, walking through the cobblestone streets under the glow of the streetlights, sharing stories and secrets we'd never told anyone else. Rachel shared tales of her fleeting relationships, how none of them seemed to last, because she hadn't found someone who truly understood her. I told her about the early days with Tom, when everything felt so right, and I believed our love could conquer anything. One night, as we were walking through the park on a cool evening, Rachel suddenly stopped and turned to me, her face illuminated by the moonlight. "You know," she said softly, "I feel like I'm coming alive again." I'd forgotten what this feels like, to be connected to someone on such a deep, real level. I stood there, momentarily speechless. My heart was pounding, caught between the joy of this connection and the fear of what it might mean. "I feel the same," I finally confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "But this—" Rachel gently placed a finger on my lips, silencing me. She pulled me closer, and we stood there in silence, listening to the rustling leaves above us. It felt like time had stopped, like we were in a world of our own, where nothing existed except this feeling, the feeling of being understood and loved in a way I hadn't felt in years. My feelings for Rachel grew deeper every day. I knew it wasn't right by society's standards, but I couldn't deny what I felt. Every time I saw her, it felt like my heart was going to burst out of my chest, like she was the missing piece I'd been searching for. And it seemed Rachel felt the same way, because her gaze wasn't just that of a friend anymore. It was the gaze of someone in love. One night, a sudden rainstorm caught us off guard as we were walking back from dinner. We rushed under the awning of a closed shop, laughing like children as the rain poured down around us. Rachel looked at me, her hair wet and clinging to her face, her smile radiant even in the dim light. She reached up and gently wiped a raindrop off my cheek. "You're beautiful," she whispered, her voice filled with sincerity. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Before I could react, Rachel leaned in and kissed me. It was a sweet, gentle kiss, but it was also filled with passion. I closed my eyes and let myself sink into it, feeling every second, every breath. All the fear, all the hesitation melted away in that kiss. I knew in that moment that there was no going back. When the rain finally let up, we stepped out from under the awning, our fingers intertwined. We didn't say a word, but we didn't need to. I realized then that I had truly fallen in love with Rachel. And even though I knew the road ahead would be difficult, I couldn't let go of this feeling because, for the first time in years, I felt alive. I felt loved. I used to think that the intense feelings I had for Rachel were just a passing phase, a fleeting spark in the monotony of my everyday life. But as time went on, I realized I was wrong. My feelings didn't fade, instead, they grew deeper and more consuming. It wasn't just excitement over a new friendship. It was longing when she wasn't near, a warmth I felt only when I looked into her deep green eyes, filled with love. Our relationship quickly turned into a thrilling secret. We were no longer just meeting up for casual coffees or walks in the park. We began sneaking around, finding hidden corners where we could steal a moment together. One Friday evening, after Tom called to say he'd be working late, I couldn't resist. I texted Rachel, "Want to watch the sunset together?" My heart raced as I hit send. Rachel's response came almost immediately, "I'll be at our usual spot." Our usual spot was a small, secluded cove behind the park where we often sat for hours under the stars. It was our haven, a place where I could escape the responsibilities of my marriage and just be with her. That night, she brought a bottle of wine and 2 plastic cups. We sat close on the sand, sharing sips of wine, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange. Rachel turned to me, a teasing smile on her lips. Don't you think we're playing with fire? She asked, her voice laced with both humor and seriousness. I swallowed hard, looking at her face, glowing in the dim light of the setting sun. Maybe, I admitted. But do you regret it? Rachel didn't answer right away. She took a sip of wine, then met my gaze, her expression unwavering. No, she said softly. You're the only one who makes me feel like I can truly be myself. I don't regret any of this. In that moment, I knew I had crossed the line long ago. This wasn't just a strong connection between two friends. This was love, a kind of love I never expected to find outside my marriage. We started messaging each other constantly. A simple text from Rachel could make me smile for hours. I've been thinking about you all day. I'd reply, me too. We'd have late-night phone calls, with me whispering in the dark while lying next to Tom, just to hear her voice and know she was thinking about me too. I started making up excuses to leave the house just to spend a few stolen hours with Rachel, even though I knew it was wrong. One time, we decided to meet at a small hotel in the east side of the city. I lied to Tom, telling him I had a work meeting. As I entered the room, I saw Rachel standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. She turned to me, her face filled with a mix of happiness and sadness. Have you thought about what happens if Tom finds out? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I looked out the window, avoiding her gaze. The city lights blurred into a swirl of colors. I know this won't end well, I said, feeling the bitterness of the words. But I can't stop. I've fallen in love with you, Rachel. In a way I've never loved anyone before. Rachel walked over, wrapping her arms around me from behind. I love you too, she whispered, her voice trembling. But we can't keep doing this forever. We need to make a choice before everything comes crashing down. In that moment, I realized just how far I'd gone. My feelings for Rachel had surpassed the boundaries of friendship a long time ago. This was love, raw, passionate, and filled with a fear I couldn't ignore. We were living in our own bubble, a world where truth and lies blurred together, where every kiss felt like it could be the last. It was thrilling, yet heartbreaking. I knew I was risking everything I had built with Tom, but I couldn't deny that Rachel had become the most important person in my life. She wasn't just a friend. She was the one who made me feel alive, who understood me in ways no one else ever had. But could this love survive once it was exposed to the harsh light of day? One rainy evening, as we walked back from dinner, we got caught in a sudden downpour. We ran for cover under the awning of a closed shop, laughing breathlessly. Rachel's hair was soaked, her face lit up with that carefree smile I adored. She reached up and gently wiped a raindrop off my cheek. You're beautiful, she said, her voice filled with raw emotion. I shivered, feeling a mix of fear and desire. Before I could respond, she leaned in and kissed me. It was a sweet, gentle kiss, but there was an intensity beneath it, as if we both knew what was at stake. When she pulled away, I felt a deep emptiness, like a part of me had left with her. As the rain slowed, we stepped out from under the awning, hand in hand, not saying a word. I realized in that moment that there was no turning back. I had fallen too deeply in love with Rachel, and I would have to face the consequences of my choice, no matter how painful it might be. We parted that night with a kiss filled with both love and sorrow, as if it could be the last time. As Rachel walked away, I felt a hollowness in my chest, knowing that I was living on borrowed time. I had crossed the point of no return, and now I had to confront the reality I'd been avoiding. The truth was bound to come out, and when it did, everything would change. Every time Tom came home after one of his long business trips, I found myself standing in the kitchen, preparing dinner with a practiced smile on my face. I knew he could sense something was different, but he didn't say it outright. Instead, he would come up behind me, wrap his arms around my waist, and place a gentle kiss on the top of my head, just like he always used to. I felt my body stiffen, a heavy weight of guilt settling in my chest, as if his touch was slowly peeling back the layers of a secret I was desperately trying to hide. I missed you, Tom would say, his voice warm and sincere. Those words once brought me comfort. They were a testament to the love we shared. but now, they felt like tiny needles pricking at my conscience. I forced a smile and turned to face him, trying to keep my gaze steady. "I missed you too," I replied, though inside I was screaming with guilt. I knew I was lying, and that was the most painful part. Tom wasn't a man who ignored the details. He used to know every small thing about me, how I liked my coffee in the morning, the way I tucked my hair behind my ear when I was nervous. But now, his attentiveness felt like a burden. Every time he held my hand, it felt like a betrayal he couldn't see. One evening, as we sat on the couch together, Tom pulled me close, his fingers running gently through my hair. "You seem different," he said, his blue eyes searching mine. "Is there something you want to tell me?" I tried to keep my composure, but a wave of anxiety washed over me like a cold current. I turned away, unable to meet his gaze. "I've just been stressed about work," I said, knowing it was a thin excuse, feeling the crack widening in the facade I had worked so hard to maintain. Tom was quiet, but I knew he wasn't convinced. He held me tighter, as if trying to pull me back to him, clinging to a version of me that he still believed was there. "I'm here for you, always," he whispered, like a promise, a vow I knew I couldn't keep anymore. Late at night, lying next to Tom in bed, the distance between us felt like an ocean. He would fall asleep with his arm draped over my waist, an unconscious attempt to hold on to me. But I lay there wide awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking only of Rachel. I wondered if she was thinking of me too, if she felt this connection as intensely as I did. I wanted to text her, to hear her voice, just to remind myself that these feelings were real, that I wasn't dreaming. One night, Tom woke up unexpectedly. He turned to me, his eyes heavy with sleep, but filled with concern. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his hand gently brushing my arm. I nodded, forcing a smile. "I just can't stop thinking about everything," I said, a half-truth mixed with a lie. Tom pulled me into his arms, whispering reassurances, but I felt trapped in the embrace of a man I once loved deeply, but who now felt like a stranger. Tom began to notice more. He saw the distant look in my eyes when I smiled at him. He realized I was spending more time outside the house, going on vague errands or meetings that I didn't fully explain. One evening, he looked directly at me, his eyes filled with a raw pain I couldn't bear to see. "Do you still love me?" Tom asked, his voice soft, but laced with a heartbreaking vulnerability. The question hit me like a punch to the chest, leaving me breathless. I wanted to say yes, that I still loved him. But the truth was, I had fallen in love with someone else in a way I'd never loved Tom. I took a deep breath, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "I don't know," I whispered, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Tom turned away, saying nothing. He stood up and left the room without looking back. The door closed softly behind him, and I was left sitting there in the dark, feeling an overwhelming wave of loneliness wash over me. Every time I faced Tom, I fought an internal battle between the love we once had and the love I now felt for Rachel. Tom was the man I had built a life with, the one I had vowed to stay with forever. But my feelings for Rachel had eclipsed everything I thought I knew about love. It was powerful, consuming, and impossible to ignore, even though it was tearing apart everything I once held dear. I realized I had reached a point of no return. While I might still love Tom in some way, I couldn't deny that my heart now belonged to someone else. Every time I looked into his pained eyes, I felt like a traitor, lost between two loves that couldn't coexist. Tom was a smart, perceptive man, and I had forgotten just how sharp he could be. At first, he was just a concerned husband, trying to figure out why I seemed so distant lately. But over time, that concern turned into suspicion. He never confronted me directly, but I could feel his eyes on me, watching every move I made, every time I picked up my phone or left the house without an explanation. In those first few weeks, Tom kept his suspicions to himself. He quietly observed, noticing the small changes in my behavior, how I spent more time away from home, how I had certain text messages. He saw how I seemed happier after vague meetings and how I often came home late with flimsy excuses. Despite his growing doubts, he didn't have enough proof to confront me outright. One night, while I was in the shower, Tom took my phone from the bedside table. He quickly scrolled through my messages, but I had carefully deleted every conversation with Rachel after each text exchange. Frustrated but not ready to confront me yet, Tom decided to change tactics. He would follow me, silently uncovering the truth he had sensed all along. That weekend, I told Tom I was meeting some friends at a cafe nearby. He nodded, pretending not to suspect anything, but as soon as I left, he followed. Keeping a safe distance, he watched me enter the cafe. But instead of meeting friends like I'd said, I lingered for only a few minutes before slipping out the back door and heading down a narrow alley. I had no idea Tom was tailing me. My heart raced as I spotted Rachel waiting for me, leaning against the wall with that familiar smile I'd craved all week. I rushed to her, throwing my arms around her in a tight embrace, like I'd been longing for this moment forever. From his spot at the corner, Tom couldn't believe what he was seeing. It felt like his entire world had collapsed in an instant. But he couldn't turn away. He watched as we kissed, a sweet, passionate kiss, one he hadn't seen from me in years. Tom's heart broke, as if a knife had been plunged into his chest, but he couldn't look away. Tom decided not to confront me then and there. He needed more evidence, needed to fully understand the depth of this relationship. He began searching for every clue he could find, credit card statements, call logs, even tracking my phone's location through an app. Each clue only deepened his pain. He discovered that every time I claimed to be out with friends, I was actually meeting Rachel at a small hotel. Those late nights when I said I was working? I was with her. Tom kept all of this to himself, letting the pain consume him bit by bit. He couldn't tell anyone, couldn't face me until he was ready. But slowly, his pain turned into anger, and then into a resolve to confront the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. One night, after I came home late from a secret meeting with Rachel, I found Tom waiting for me in the living room. The air was heavy, and I instantly knew something was wrong. Tom sat there, his expression cold, stripped of the warmth I was used to. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but firm. I nodded, trying to stay calm, but my hands were trembling uncontrollably. Tom pulled out his phone and showed me the photos he had taken, me and Rachel, holding hands, hugging, kissing in the cafe, at the hotel. Each photo felt like a shard of glass piercing my heart, and I knew there were no more lies I could tell. "How could you do this to me?" Tom's voice cracked, filled with raw pain. "You've betrayed me, not just with another man, but with her. How long have you been lying to me?" I felt like I couldn't breathe, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. "Tom, I'm so sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I can't explain it. I just know that I love her. And I can't stop." Tom shot up from the chair, slamming his hand down on the table. I flinched at the sound. "You love her? What about me? What about everything we've built together? Are you throwing it all away for a passing infatuation?" I shook my head, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, Tom. This isn't just an infatuation. This is real. I've fallen in love with Rachel in a way I never loved anyone, not even you." Tom staggered back, as if he'd been punched in the gut. He turned away, saying nothing, but I could see his shoulders shaking. That was the moment I realized I had lost him forever. Tom wasn't the strong, confident man I once knew. He was just a broken husband, standing there with the shattered pieces of his heart laid bare. Tom never imagined his marriage would end this way. At first, when the suspicion of an affair crept into his mind, he tried to convince himself it was just a misunderstanding. He looked for reasonable explanations for my growing distance. Maybe I was dealing with stress at work. Maybe I needed more space. But as the pieces started coming together, Tom realized the truth was far harsher than he could have ever anticipated. The first time Tom saw me and Rachel kiss on the corner of a street, it felt like he had been punched in the gut. The world around him seemed to freeze. The noise of traffic and people faded into a distant hum. Part of him wanted to rush over, to scream, to confront us right then and there. But another part of him was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to accept what he was witnessing. His wife, the woman he had loved and trusted, was in love with another woman. This discovery wasn't just an emotional shock, it was a blow to Tom's very sense of self. He couldn't help but wonder what he had done wrong, what signs he had missed that led his wife to seek love in the arms of another woman. It was a deep, complicated pain he couldn't fully grasp. It wasn't just betrayal he felt, it was a sense of being replaced in a way he never imagined. Tom felt his self-esteem shatter. He had always thought that if I were to betray him, it would be with another man, someone who might be better in some way, more attractive, wealthier, more charming. But this was different. Rachel wasn't a man, she was a woman. And that left Tom feeling completely disoriented. He couldn't compete with Rachel, couldn't understand the kind of attraction I felt towards her. It was a kind of jealousy he had never experienced before, the jealousy of knowing he couldn't be the person I needed. In the nights that followed his discovery, Tom couldn't sleep. He lay awake in bed next to me, listening to my steady breathing, feeling like there was a vast chasm between us. He would turn away, staring up at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. Images of me and Rachel together flashed through his mind, those smiles I gave her, the ones he hadn't seen in years. It hurt him deeply, as if every effort, every ounce of love he had poured into our marriage had been for nothing. Tom started questioning everything. He wondered if he had done something wrong, if he had missed the signs that had been there all along. He thought back to the moments when I seemed distant, when I no longer showed interest in the things we once loved doing together. He remembered the hollow kisses, the half-hearted embraces, and realized that the cracks had been there for a long time. But never once did he think it was because I had fallen in love with another woman. He had believed that our love was strong enough to withstand anything. But now, he felt like the ground beneath him was crumbling, and every belief he once held was falling apart. Part of Tom was horrified by this truth. The idea of his wife being in love with another woman was something he had never considered. It was a reality he didn't know how to process. He felt like he had lost not just his wife, but also the stability of his life, as if he had been thrust into a world he couldn't understand and couldn't control. At the same time, Tom felt a profound sadness, a deep sense of loss in realizing that I had found happiness elsewhere, with someone else. He thought back to the vows we made on our wedding day, that he would do everything he could to make me happy. And now, he realized that he had failed. Not because he didn't try hard enough, but because I needed something he couldn't give, something only Rachel could provide. Tom understood that his jealousy wasn't just about losing me, it was about the loss of his own sense of self-worth and pride. He had not only lost his wife, but also the image of himself as the perfect husband he thought he was. He had no idea how to face me, no idea how to forgive or even comprehend these feelings. When he finally stood in front of me, facing the truth, Tom was no longer the competent, strong man I once knew. He was a broken husband, grappling with emotions he had never experienced before. His eyes were filled with pain, anger, and disappointment. He couldn't hide the tremble in his voice as he asked, "How could you love her more than me? How is our love not enough?" In that moment, I knew I had hurt him in a way that could never be healed. Tom hadn't just lost the woman he loved, he had lost his faith in love itself. He turned away and walked out of the room, carrying a pain I knew would stay with him forever. When Tom finally walked out of the room, he didn't look back. The door slammed shut behind him, and I sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I knew then that I had gone too far, that there was no way back. It was all over, our marriage, the trust Tom once had in me, and the life we had fought so hard to build together. After the tearful confrontation in the living room, I felt as if the entire world had collapsed around me. Tom left the house without saying a word, leaving me alone with the shattered pieces of what had once been a perfect marriage. I stood there, paralyzed, unsure of what to do, unsure of what to think. I wanted to chase after him, to apologize, to explain, but I knew there were no words that could mend the pain I had caused. In a state of panic, I found myself heading to the only place where I still felt safe, Rachel's apartment. It was a small place in a quiet neighborhood, about a half-hour drive from our house. I pounded on her door, tears streaming down my face as she opened it. Rachel didn't need to ask what had happened, she just wrapped her arms around me, letting me cry in silence. She pulled me into the living room and sat me down on her old, worn-out sofa. "What happened?" she asked softly, stroking my hair. "Tom knows," I choked out, the words stabbing into my heart. "He saw us. He knows everything." Rachel fell silent, a pained expression crossing her face. "Did he say anything?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "He didn't say much," I replied. "He just asked why. Why our love wasn't enough. Why I love you more than I love him." I turned away, trying to hold back the flood of tears, but they kept coming. And I didn't know what to say. I couldn't explain it. I just know that my love for you is real, and I can't stop it. Rachel held me tighter, pulling me close. "You don't need to explain," she whispered. "You've made your choice, but now you have to decide. You can't keep living between two worlds." Her words felt like a jolt of electricity running down my spine. I knew she was right. I couldn't keep straddling the line between my love for Rachel and my responsibilities to Tom. It was time to make a decision, no matter how much it hurt. I sat there in silence, looking into Rachel's green eyes, feeling the warmth and love she had for me. "He'll never forgive me," I said quietly. "And I don't know if I can forgive myself either." Rachel took my hand, her gaze steady and full of resolve. "You don't need his forgiveness," she said. "You need to be true to yourself. You need to choose the love that feels right, even if it means tearing apart everything you once knew." Her words hit me like a punch, forcing me to confront the truth I had been avoiding for so long. I loved Rachel in a way I had never loved anyone else. With her, I felt like I could finally be myself, without pretending, without hiding. But I also knew that choosing this path would plunge Tom into a deep, unfixable pain, and maybe I would never be forgiven for it. The next morning, I returned home, stepping into an atmosphere so tense it felt like the air was about to crack. Tom was sitting at the dining table, his face stiff, devoid of any emotion. I walked into the room, searching for words to start with, but everything I wanted to say seemed stuck in my throat. "I've been thinking all night," Tom began, his voice hoarse, like he'd spent hours crying. "I've thought about everything we had, everything we built together. And I have just one question." I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. "Ask me," I whispered. "Who are you going to choose?" Tom asked, his eyes filled with a raw, unbearable pain. "Me, the one who's been with you since the beginning, who stood by you through everything. Or her, the woman you fell in love with recently, but who seems to have captured your entire heart." Tom's question felt like it shattered my already broken heart into a million pieces. I wanted to tell him that I still loved him, that I never meant to hurt him. But I knew that if I lied one more time, I'd never be able to forgive myself. "I choose Rachel," I said, my voice cracking with each word. "I can't deny how I feel about her. I love you, Tom, but it's a different kind of love. I can't be the person you need me to be anymore." Tom went still, as if he had taken a physical blow to the chest. He didn't say anything, just stood up and walked out of the room without looking back. I heard the front door slam shut, and I knew he wasn't coming back. I sank to the floor, feeling the weight of the entire world crushing down on my shoulders. I had made my choice, and now I had to live with the consequences. Rachel might be the one who brought me the love I had always craved, but the price I paid was immense. I had lost Tom, the man I once promised to stay with forever. When I picked up my phone and texted Rachel, I knew there was no turning back. It was all over. My marriage, the life I once trusted in, had shattered into pieces that could never be put back together. 9. The breakup didn't happen in a single moment. It was a series of painful, fragmented instances, like the gradual cutting of every string that had once held me and Tom together. We had shared a life, a home full of memories, but now all that was left were objects, silent remnants of our past. The divorce wasn't quiet, it was an emotional battleground that both of us had to navigate. Tom and I decided to meet one last time at the house we used to share. It was a rainy day, the sky dark and heavy, mirroring the sadness and sense of loss that engulfed us. Tom stood there in the empty living room, staring out the window without saying a word. I walked in, feeling like I was crossing the final boundary between the life we once had and an uncertain future I wasn't ready to face. "It's all over, isn't it?" Tom asked, his voice hoarse and exhausted. He didn't look at me, but I could see the slight tremble in his shoulders. "Yes, it's over," I replied, my own voice betraying the depth of my sorrow. "I never wanted it to end like this, Tom." Tom turned to face me, his eyes red-rimmed, filled with a sadness that I knew would never fully fade. "I didn't want this either," he said. "But we don't have a choice anymore. You chose Rachel, and I can't change that. I just need to know if everything we had meant anything to you. Did you ever truly love me?" Tears streamed down my face as I stepped closer to him. "Tom, I did love you," I said. "But that love changed. It's not the kind of love you need, or the kind I can give anymore. You deserve someone who can love you in a way I can't." Tom took a deep breath, as if trying to hold back his emotions. "I understand," he said quietly. "I hope you find the happiness you're looking for. But you should know, you took a piece of me that no one else can ever replace." We embraced for the last time, a tearful hug filled with pain and heartbreak. As Tom walked out of the house, I watched him disappear into the rain. It was the last time I saw the man I once promised to love forever. After the divorce, I moved in with Rachel. Her small apartment became my new home, but it didn't offer the comfort I had imagined. I began to feel an emptiness I couldn't escape, as if I had left behind a part of my life that I couldn't retrieve. On sleepless nights, I lay in Rachel's arms, but my mind wandered back to Tom, to the memories we once shared. I found myself questioning whether I had made the right choice, whether the love I chose was worth everything I had lost. Rachel was always there for me, trying her best to help me through the pain. She took me on walks, tried to make me laugh, but my smiles were hollow, mere shadows of what they used to be. I loved Rachel, but that love couldn't mask the grief of losing a life I once believed in. It felt like I was living in a dream I couldn't wake up from, a dream I had created for myself but didn't know how to escape. One day, Rachel looked at me, her eyes filled with concern. "You regret it, don't you?" she asked gently. I couldn't answer right away. I looked into her eyes, feeling the love and sacrifice she had given me. "I don't regret loving you," I said softly. "But I regret hurting Tom. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive myself for that." Tom moved into a smaller apartment on the other side of town. He started a new life, but the loneliness lingered, gnawing at him day by day. He went to work, met up with friends, but couldn't find the joy he once had. Every morning, he looked at the empty chair where I used to sit, feeling a void that seemed impossible to fill. Tom started dating again, but each time he met someone new, he found himself comparing her to me. He wondered if anyone could ever take my place, if he could love again after all the hurt. It felt like he had lost a part of himself, the part he had given to me, and he didn't know how to get it back. One late night, Tom received a text from me. "It was simple. I hope you're okay." He stared at the screen, feeling the old wound tear open once more. He didn't reply. Instead, he put his phone down and looked out the window, knowing that no words could ever heal this pain. It was a pain he would carry with him forever. Time moved on, and while the wound slowly healed, the scars remained, marks of a chapter in our lives that none of us could erase. Our story didn't end with forgiveness or reconciliation, but with acceptance that sometimes love and pain are two sides of the same coin, and that living authentically often comes at an unforeseeable cost. Tom, once a man who believed that love alone could conquer all, was forced to confront a harsh truth. Love, no matter how genuine, cannot guarantee happiness without understanding and honesty. He moved forward with a heavier heart, but also a deeper, wiser soul. Tom didn't rush into new relationships. Instead, he took the time to rediscover himself, to realize that sometimes loss isn't an end, but an opportunity for rebirth, a chance to redefine his own life on his terms. Rachel and I continued our relationship, but not in the way we had once imagined. Our love, though intense and consuming, carried a weariness, a sadness that couldn't be ignored. At times, when she looked at me, I could see an unspoken question in her eyes. Was this love worth it? Could we ever overcome the shadows of the past, or were we destined to live with the ghost of what we had sacrificed? As for me, this journey taught me that there are no perfect choices, no paths that lead to happiness without some form of pain. I had loved, betrayed, and given up a part of myself in pursuit of a true and honest love. But in the end, I realized that loving someone else wasn't the answer to the loneliness in my own soul. It was only a piece of the puzzle, a step on the path toward finding true peace within. We didn't find the freedom and love that we had once hoped for. Instead, we found it in accepting our imperfections, in facing our mistakes, and in learning to live with the consequences of what we had created. This story doesn't end with a clear resolution of joy or sorrow, but rather with a quiet sense of balance, a newfound equilibrium between love and loss. It serves as a reminder that love isn't always the answer. It's often a question, one that tests our courage, our willingness to take risks, and our capacity to live authentically, even when the cost is heartbreak. As readers close the book on our story, they may not find a fairy tale ending. But perhaps they will be comforted by its honesty, because life isn't a straight line toward happiness. It's a winding journey filled with detours, difficult choices, and painful but invaluable lessons. In the end, our story leaves an open question. Can someone truly find peace after their heart has been shattered? Is it possible to love again after trust has been broken? The answers aren't found in these pages. They lie within each of us, in how we choose to live, how we choose to love, and how we choose to forgive, not just others, but ourselves as well.